Hi, my name is Scott Thomas. Welcome to Higher Level Editing. These videos are not only for editors, they're also for producers who use Avid Media Composer. I'm going to show you some of the tricks and techniques I use in large, complex, multi-user projects that will bring your editing skills or producing skills up to a higher level. Let's get started. Okay, let's look at some audio tricks that I use when I'm editing. You'll see here a very simple timeline. This sequence only has 6 audio tracks and 2 video tracks. It's actually the introduction I made for all the episodes, and I've just stolen it from episode 2. So you have me saying, "Hi, my name is Scott Thomas. Welcome to Higher Level Editing," and the title sequence. Now at the moment we can't see any audio information here at all, so the first thing I want to do is turn on waveform. So the waveform will show you the audio levels or the audio energy on every track. So you can select the waveform to be switched on each individual track by clicking here, and that turns on the waveform, and then you can add it onto here. Now if you can't see this area here, which has track control channels and it also has real-time audio blocks, you've probably got it switched off down here in the fast menu track control panel. That's a toggle. You can hide it, gives you a bit more space, or if you can, and I suggest you do, leave it on. That way you can see the individual waveforms. But I want to have these on for every track. I don't want to select individually. So that's simple too. Back to the track menu, audio data, waveform. And there you have it. All the tracks now have it on. You might have noticed actually here, let me just go back one stage and switch it off again, is that down the bottom of this audio data you have allow per track settings. Now if you turn that off and you try to switch these on, you'll notice it's not generating any waveform. So that's another reason why this may not work. So back to the audio data, switch on allow per track, but you don't necessarily need to if you select waveform. And there you have it. You now see your waveforms on here of me talking and then the music from the titles. Now it's a little bit squished up here, so we've got plenty of space on this screen. So I'm going to enlarge these tracks. I can very quickly select the tracks I want to expand. We'll just select the audio tracks and then expand these. Now, you need to deselect the source side because that will also select which tracks you're expanding. So then you can expand the tracks, and the simple way from doing that is Control plus L. And you can keep going and all these will expand as much as you like. Now you'll notice here that we've actually got some grids coming up, which is actually a meter system. I don't like seeing these. I like to see the waveform clear. So I will reduce this back using Control and K until that disappears. There. Now also they're squished this way, so I'm just going to expand the timeline, which is Control and right bracket. And now you can see pretty clearly that the waveform peaks and where the sentences or words will start. Avid Media Composer. I'm going to show you some of the tricks and techniques I use in large, complex, multi-user projects. As you can see, the waveform is nicely following what I'm saying. So I'm just going to bring that back to show the whole timeline. Now what I'm going to do is put a bit of music underneath. So I'm just going to shift and drag to deselect, and I'm going to put music on tracks 5 and 6. So here's a little track that I'm going to put in, marking it out so it comes out on the titles, and just paste it in. too loud anyway. So the first thing I'm going to do is just reduce the level down. I'm going to go over to the other side where I have my audio mixer. I'm going to gang those two tracks together, and I'm just going to bring it down. Now if you're bringing in library music, they almost always come in at about 11 dB above the peak. So if you drop that down to about -11, it will give you a pretty good level. Hi, my name is Scott Thomas. Welcome to Higher Level Editing. It's too loud for my voice, but if it was just music, that would be about right. So I'm going to bring this back down to probably around about -20 is a good kind of level to mix in with the voice, if the voice is good level. Hi, my name is Scott Thomas. Welcome to Higher Level Editing. That's pretty good. And here's a little tip when you're bringing in lots of music tracks and you want to audition them. If you open them, you can see that the levels are at 0. All these tracks are at 0. So you play these back, it's going to be very loud when you hear them. So what I really want to do is change all of them to that -11 setting. And here's how to do it. Select all of the clips in the bin, right click, go up to the top where it's audio, go over to the right, select apply gain, enter -11 and click OK. And then everyone that you select will now have their audio changed to -11. Of course, if you want to just change some of them or just listen back at -20 for good levels, select -19. And then you will see that all these that I bring in, if I look at this one, it's still at -11, but the ones above I changed and they're all at -19. So great quick way of changing everything in one bin to the right audio level. Just apply gain and just whatever level you want to listen to. Back to the timeline. I'm going to come in on that first beat, but I can't see it. What I want to do is make sure that the waveform is of a size that I can see clearly. So I'm just going to expand out the timeline again. You can get in here right from the beginning. Somewhere around here is that first beat, but I can't see it. Now here's a really good trick that a lot of people don't know about. You can reduce the size of a waveform. And this is done by making sure that you're on the timeline, not into any other window or bin, and going Control Alt K. That reduces the height of your waveform. You can see every time I press Control Alt K, it makes the waveform smaller in height. And I can't go any further than that. That's as small as it'll go. But now you can very clearly see the definition of the peaks and probably every beat. Certainly it's going to be good enough to see where that first beat is. A quick scrub on here. Remember, in this new version of Avid Editing, if you need to scrub the audio, you have to hold down the Shift key. So there's my first beat. I'm going to just quickly mark in and out of that. I'm going to drag it back and put it right at the beginning so the beat comes in right there. So that's a really good way of being able to look, particularly at music. So if the music will be crushed up against the end limits because of the audio level that it comes in at usually. So to be able to see where the audio levels are, reduce it down. So just a reminder again, to expand it out, it's Control Alt or Opt L. And that's what it would normally look like. That's its default size. And you can bring that down to a nice size that you want to see. You can do the same with the dialogue, of course. If you had a particularly quiet bit of dialogue that you wanted to see the waveforms, you can go Control Alt L and make those larger. Now just a little note here of what's happened is that once again I have two source tracks selected here, and they are also changing the size and the height of the waveform. So deselect that, and now I'm just looking at my dialogue. Get that to the right size, and I'm happy with that now. Just unselect editing. These videos are not only for editors, they're also for producers who use Avid Media. So that's just about right now in terms of my waveform height. Let's have a look at this music track down here. We'll just expand out. Is that a little bit high? It looks it. So we're just going to select those tracks and Control-Alt-K. Just bring it down one step. And there, looks good. So if you saw the timeline tricks and techniques video prior to this, you will have looked at the timeline view menu. And if you want to save the height of the waveform, you can do it with timeline view. So I'm just going to save as this again and keep it as the audio demo, but remove the 0.1 at the end and replace that one. So now whenever I go into this audio demo, let's go into all tracks, not only will it resize the tracks as I want them, but it will also resize the waveform size. I'm just going to have a quick look at the audio data, because there is one other option that I haven't got selected, which is clip gain. Now, a lot of editors do use this. I tend not to use it because I like to go back to the audio mixer, but it is a good way of quickly riding up and down the audio level of the track. One of the problems I find though in using this technique is that even though if you look on the audio mixer these two tracks are ganged together, when you rise one up the other one doesn't follow. So I'll just undo that. If you go over to the audio mixer and do it there, the two audio levels of both the tracks move together. So that's one of the reasons why I don't tend to use the audio gain tool. Quite often I pick up sequences where the music tracks have different levels on the left and right side, and that's possibly why they've been worked on using the gain tool. So I tend to hide that. It's also rather frustrating because it's on an edit point usually, and can often be in the way of what you're looking at, particularly the waveform. So I am going to, in the audio data, turn off clip gain. Now, one of the things that is a problem with a lot of programs that I see is the stereo/mono way of working. Now, we know that we've got two tracks of music here and we want them to be stereo. So we want track 1 of this, which is actually on A5, to be panned to the left, and the right hand one to be panned to the right. Now in this case, if we look at the audio mixer, you can see that these are panned into the middle. Now if I actually mute one of them, I'll also mute myself and press play, if you look at the meter here, you will see 2 tracks of audio. So even though I only have 1 track of audio here in the timeline selected, it's going into the center. It's being mixed down into 2, which is not what you want to do when you're working with music. You want to have left and right stereo and the dialogue kept to the middle. So one of the ways of doing it is to, let's just ungang that and undo it. Again, when you gang these two together, as it's called, you're going to do both the same. So I'm just going to use that way of doing it. And I've already got music muted on that track, so in theory I'm only going to hear the left track when I play it. And I do. And that's what I want. So I go back to stereo, and it's a nice stereo mix. Now the reason that these 2 tracks were centered at the beginning is usually down to a setting in your audio settings. If we go over to settings and user and click on audio, you will see that the default pan for mono tracks is centered. And that means that every time you bring in a bit of stereo music on 2 mono tracks, they will be centered and you need to pan them to the left and the right. if you select alternating left and right, that shouldn't happen. It should bring them in pre-panned left and right. So let's see if I mark that in, and I'll bring in this track again. And put it onto the track, and we look at it and it's left and right. It's coming correctly. Let's just undo that. So again, it's a setting issue. Once you've changed your setting here, it's always a good idea to go back into the setting window and file and save settings, or control or command S, and that way that's saved it correctly. Now, audio demo here, we've changed something, it's slightly tweaked, but I want to save it, so I'm going to save that too, replace it, and that can also be saved with just Control and S. So quite often you'll end up with a sequence which unfortunately has everything centered. If you want to center something, you can actually hit Alt and click that pan button. That way it centers it automatically. That's easy, but it's very difficult to get it to go to the left. So I want to make sure that these are left and right on music, but I also want to have the dialogue tracks to be centered. I don't want them just to be on the left hand channel. So rather than have to individually correct all my audio track panning, I use what I call a pre-panning tool. So I've got this on a sequence. I'm just going to open this sequence here, and this sequence looks completely empty. It isn't. It's 30 minutes long. Right at the end of this track, if I expand it out, you will see these tracks here, called track panning tool, mics and music. Now if I look on the audio mixer over here, if I pan to the right, all these tracks we're looking at here up to 32 are panned to the middle. From 33 onwards, they are panned left and right. I can put this section at the end of a sequence and very quickly change the panning. So I'm going to apply this to my little demo sequence. I'm going to bring my template, which has at the end of it the panning tool. Just going to switch on the screen so you can see where I'll go in and out. This is only about 2 seconds long, this section at the end, that's all it is. But with this at the end, I can add it to my other sequence. I'm just going to do a little bit of patching because this was designed for a much larger system. So 1 and 2 are good, they're going to be mono, but my music needs to be patched from the music below. So I'm just going to do a quick patch of 4 tracks. And I'm going to paste that in. And you can see here that I have a mid, another mid, and then 4 left and right tracks. This I want to apply to the rest of the sequence, which at the moment has a left hand patch. That's alright, but let's quickly make it wrong. Let's make those wrong as well. I want to change track 1 into a center pan. I want to change tracks 3 and 4 into a left and right, and 5 and 6 into a left and right, without having to go through the dragging of the panning tool. So, mark an in at the beginning of where you want to do it, mark an out on your panning sequence. This gives you an in and out, and you're parked on the panning section. Go back to the audio mixer, hit the fast menu, and select Set Pan on Track into Out. This is going to take the panning information from where the cursor is parked and copy it onto the tracks that are selected. So hit that, and now we will see track 1 has become mid-panned, tracks 5 and 6 are left and right, and tracks 3 and 4 are panned left and right. It's a really quick trick for correcting badly aligned panning. It's always useful to have. I keep it in my Scott Essentials bin, and I have it either on a template, or you can actually keep it as just a tack panning tool. Let's go on to the left hand side, which is simply this 2-second sequence with all the tracks correctly panned all the way through the timeline sequence. Okay, that's it for audio panning. Now let's have a look at audio keyframing. I have to admit that I didn't used to use audio keyframing. In fact, I didn't use it for probably a dozen years using Avid, but now I find it absolutely the best way to work. So the quickest way of adding an audio keyframe is by pressing the keyframe button on your keyboard. That's the inverted comma key near the enter key, which also has an upward facing pink triangle if you're using a proper Avid keyboard. Let's just do a change of audio level using a keyframe on here. So I'm just selected my music tracks here, and I'm going to add a keyframe right in here by pressing this key. And then I'm going to add another one here, and we have 4 keyframes. If you go and select this and it doesn't change color to the pink, it's because you haven't got audio keyframing switched on. What you need to do is find this symbol up here, the audio keyframe mode, and make sure that it's highlighted. And that catches a lot of people out, to be fair, including me. Sometimes you can just hit it. Maybe I wanted to do a fade effect and I clicked the wrong thing and turned it off. And you go, why can I not adjust my keyframes? And I see it often questioned online. Now I can select my keyframes. Single click selects just one of them. If you shift click, you can select 2 or more. Again, control will select individuals. Shift. If you want to deselect one which is already selected, hit shift again and click it. If you want to select keyframes using lasso, you have to hold down the Alt or Opt key and drag over it. If you don't hold down the Alt key, you'll find that you're just moving your cursor around. Also, as soon as you start dragging, it deselects the ones you've already chosen. That's a good way of getting rid of them if you want to select others. If you need to individually get rid of it, shift and click. So let's put in a dip here. So I want to select these 2 and drop them down. Now, as you hover over this, it turns into a hand. Now, one thing to notice is that as you do drag it, there's a bit of information that comes up. I'm going to highlight it. Where your timeline view is normally showing, it turns into a dB readout. And you can see down below how much you're adjusting it. If you click on it and hold, you'll see it says 9 dB. It's a good way of showing you exactly what level is. These levels are the same as applying a gain. Now in this situation, we've already dropped the music by 17.2 dB, and I've dropped it by another 9. So if you listen to it, we'll just mono this, get it away from my voice. It goes much quieter. So say we wanted just to rise it up briefly in this gap here and then drop it down. So what I want to do is I want to select these keyframes, and I'm actually going to make it louder. Now I've already dropped it by 17. Now I want to bring it back up to its kind of correct full level, which is going to be adding another 7 dB. You see at the bottom it's ranging up, so 5, and that's 7 dB. That should be the right level. Now the problem is, of course, these keyframes have been put in the wrong place. Where I want them is here. So I'm just going to lasso both of them. And then, this is the next trick, hold down the Alt button and drag them to the left. This then brings, you can drag them anywhere along the timeline. Let's bring it back to here. We'll put my voice back on. Welcome to higher level editing. These videos are not only for editors. What I want to do here is increase the speed of that fade up. Make it shorter, in other words. Again, lasso the clips, hold down Alt and drag it back to the point you want to. Higher level editing. These videos are not only for... And there we have it. Now I want to dip it out, so we're going to go just before I start speaking again. Both tracks selected, hit the add keyframe, the inverted comma on your keyboard, and then another one just there, lasso that and drop it back down to where we had it before. So that's 0 dB gain using the keyframes, even though we still have -17 as the gain on that track of music. And then we end up with a bit of a dip. Higher level editing. These videos are not... So let's say we want to put another one in here. So again, very quickly just add a couple of keyframes, 4 keyframes in all. Select the middle two, Alt and drag, and then this time to raise them up, there's no Control key or Alt key, you just drag it up and that gives you the level. Again, we wanted about 7 dB louder, and that's what we've got down the bottom, 7 dB. We now have 2 higher level editing. These videos are not only for editors, they're also for producers who use Avid Media Composer. I'm going to show you some of the tricks and techniques. So what happens if you think those levels are just too high, or I want to drop the whole track level by 2 dB? You can do that by simply dragging over all the keyframes, holding down the Alt key. It'll select all of them, and then you can move them down. I'll just undo that. If you want to have a little bit more control over these, you can lasso them, and if you hold down Shift and Control and hit the downward arrow, you will move 1 dB each time you press the arrow. So you can move all your keyframes or any keyframes up and down. This gives you very good control over the audio levels. I'm just going to clear my left-hand monitor. You'll see why in a minute. I'm just going to make these tracks much larger. We'll go back to the beginning of the episode. Make sure you're on the timeline and click Ctrl L, and you'll increase the height of the timeline. And you can see the keyframes a little bit clearer. Let's say I want to reduce the height of these keyframes. In other words, not make the dip up quite so loud. Well, you can do that again by going Alt and drag and carefully just select the top level keyframes. Still holding down the Alt button, go to these other ones and hold down the Shift key. So now you're holding down Alt and Shift. Lasso over again, and now you select those. So now we've just selected the top ones, and all I want to do is drop these by 2 dB. So without doing anything else, I'm going to hold down Shift and Control and hit the downward arrow. And you can see down here very briefly, let me just go back again so you can see it easier. You look down here, as I press it, this will change. I just put my cursor next to it so you can see where you're going, so not step out, so you can see it. As I hit the down key while holding Shift and Control, you can see there's a delta symbol, which means change, and I'm dropping it down to dB. And that's how I came down. If I now select a keyframe, you'll see it's at +5, was at +7 to bring me back up. So I've managed to adjust all those very easily. Higher level editing. These videos are not only for editors, they're also for producers. Now let's say I want to adjust all these down a bit and not these. Well, you can lasso them and bring them down. That's one way of doing it. Let's say you have a lot all along the timeline. If you just hit an in and an out for this section and just go and start dragging any of the keyframes, it automatically selects the keyframes within the in and out. And then I can drop these down to a new level. So this is quite a powerful little trick to use, the in and out, because you can very quickly select these, but do be careful because it's quite easy to select them inadvertently when you have in and out and you're doing some video work maybe somewhere else, and you can just quickly adjust these. One of the things I've seen quite frequently is everything being out of sync because someone has just dragged them to a little bit the wrong way and everything is out by a few frames. So we can undo that. So make sure you use keyframes. One of the things that I do use it for is for fading out or fading in new tracks. You can also put tracks onto different levels and mix them together. I think I'll just do a quick demo here. We have this music. Let's try and find this track here. Just going to match frame to it and then see if it's got an end to it. Expand it out. I'll have a quick look for the end point. There. Again, the usefulness of the waveform, which matches on the source side from the master side. Whatever the master size of waveform is selected over there, it'll match on this side. So there's my ending, and we'll check our ending on the master. Sounds like I need a little bit more there. That's my beat, first beat of the bar. That sounds right to me. So let's just patch in that track. And that sounds almost spot on, but you'll notice I've got a little bit of that beat there, so I'm just going to put it back on track. So that sounds good. I haven't got my audio level right though. So up until this point I dropped the music by 17.2 dB, and on the new section it's 0. So there's a quick way of matching those two. Again, mark an in and the out. Go on to the side which is correct. Go to the audio mixer tool and go set clip on track into out. So this is minus 17.2, and so is the right hand side now. I'm just going to clear my ins and outs, and I can put in my keyframe, and let's say I want to just make it a bit louder just for the end, so we'll just bring that up there. Or what might work better there, listening to it, is to raise up the audio just before we get to the edit. I'm going to raise that up. Let's open this up a bit more. So I want to bring up the keyframe of the outgoing and the keyframe of the ingoing. I can't lasso over an edit point because it'll just go into trim mode. But I can have in and out on these keyframes and just select one keyframe and drag that up. That's the benefit of having the in and out trick. I'm just going to unmute me, keep that track muted because this isn't going to work with the music. Or producing skills up to a higher level. Let's get started. One of the other benefits of the keyframes is that this will go through to the audio dub. They will be able to see these audio changes and hopefully keep them, although I can't make any promises on that. I hope this has been useful. Do come back for the next episode.